Welcome back, black man, what's up? Welcome back to the power of healthy habits, where small changes can lead to big transformations. Today's episode is brought to you by Michelle O'Shea. I'm wearing one of their shirts. It is a athleisure apparel brand. You can find out more at michelleoshea.com. So in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about something that I think we all have the capability of exhibiting, and that is going to be the power of self-awareness, or the habit of expressing self-awareness. I think that's essential, especially given the climate that we're in now. It's currently the fall of 2025, and it's essential for us to be aware of where we are mentally, emotionally, physically, given the day-to-day interactions you could potentially have. And even if you're not having them, maybe your family member or the environment that you're in can bring about situations that just haven't been normal for the past few years, and probably shouldn't be normal at any time in life. So in a world full of triggers, traps, tension, we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to stay grounded and move through some of these scenarios, especially as black men, having a way to support one another and rise and not react, especially, is going to be a skill in most circumstances that we could utilize if there's a tense undertone or environment that we're operating in. So I don't want to assume, but I'm assuming that many of us may have been aware of, heard the term self-awareness, but just to define it a little more, I think that'll help everyone out there. So, what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is not just knowing yourself. It's the ability to observe your own emotions, thoughts, behaviors in real time. It's the pause between trigger and response. For example, that moment when someone says something disrespectful and you feel your blood is boiling, but instead of snapping or going off, flying off the handle, as my grandmother might say, you take a breath and you respond with clarity. So that pause, that moment to think before you respond, rather than letting the first thing that comes out of your mouth be the statement that sets the tone. That's important because if we're triggered into situations, we're triggered into scenarios, we might respond in a way that we wouldn't normally. Or I think the biggest part is making sure that we don't respond in a way that would, even though it wouldn't justify it in the greater sense of the word, that would then justify another person's reaction to your response. So if in that example, someone says something disrespectful and you immediately respond, well, then the person you're responding to may have wanted that reaction so that they could justify going above and beyond the simple disrespectful words and potentially physically harming you, detaining you, etc. Another thing that we have to consider, and I think that as men we need to be checking in with one another and our children, is the cost of reacting. There's a cost to responding out of emotion or out of a trigger. Too many lives, for example, there's so many examples that I don't even want to talk about examples, but too many lives have been lost because of one impulsive moment. That split second that could have been a pause, not taking the bait, and be self-aware so that we don't get ourselves into a situation that we would regret or act outside of our better judgment. And it's difficult sometimes because if you're absorbing harassment to other people, especially from the outside looking in, it could look like a sign of weakness. It could look less masculine. It could look as if you are obedient to another person's words. And it's difficult for everyone. It's difficult for myself if you are feeling those emotions. Because for one, especially if you're not being treated fairly or as a human being, you can internalize those emotions. And being self-aware is essential, knowing who you really are and what you're really feeling in the heat of the moment. And also being aware, taking inventory, I like to say, at the beginning of your day could help reduce and de-escalate situations where we know tensions are high and they're deliberately high. When I'm cognizant of it, I try to take inventory before I get out of the bed of how I'm feeling emotionally and physically, of course, and what I'm going to be doing throughout the day. I try to base my interactions on how I'm feeling and whether or not I should allow myself to be in an environment that could potentially lead to a negative outcome. So if you wake up in the morning and you don't have to rush to the restroom and you can just comfortably lay there, think about how you feel the moment you wake up, and think about, some of the things that you're going to have to experience from the time you leave the house until the time you get back home. And whether or not a mistake or misspoken words could potentially cause you to have a reaction that you wouldn't normally have. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is a habit like that could help you or could help us avoid unnecessary outcomes. It won't work every time, but at least you are aware so that when you, let's say, just walk into a situation that you weren't expecting to experience, it could be at a gas station, getting gas, had nothing to do with you, but now you're faced with the situation. And if you don't think about, okay, this is where I am, this is how I'm feeling, your reaction to whatever's going on could potentially be much worse than what it normally would be. I'm reminded of a scenario that I saw. It was on YouTube. It was a gentleman, I know he was in a department store. I think it was a Belk somewhere in the southeast United States. And a person, the man was a black man or African American. And the person who was working at the department store said a racial slur. And the black man did not respond in violence. He didn't respond with another verbal assault in response, but he gave this man a lecture on decency and the cost of being inappropriate in public and not knowing what another person is going through. He was very much self-aware. He was also very much self-aware that if he responded in violence, that he might not ever see his family again. Because the gentleman who verbally assaulted him was an older man. He apologized, but he was an older man, and he knew that physically there would be nothing he could do. And the gentleman said this: there's nothing that anybody could do to stop me from doing whatever I want to do. And given the current days and time, I like to ensure that we're protecting ourselves from being baited into situations that could change the trajectory of our lives. Protect your wisdom, protect your knowledge by being self-aware and knowing you don't know when things might happen, but knowing who you are is paramount. Now, that's not to say that there aren't situations where, you know, you have to defend yourself. You know, a physical assault is completely different. Seeing a scenario in which you could become cornered, trapped, not just proverbially, but physically cornered and trapped with your back against the wall, then you have to respond in a way that's going to preserve your life so that you can at least get back home. And that self-awareness, just having that in the front of mind and being cognizant. I'm not saying it'll resolve everything, but I'm trying to at least talk about solutions that we all can potentially tap into so that we can be the best that we can and get back home without major injury or issue. The next point that I wanted to talk about is how we can collectively show a more unified front or participate in a more unified way, having a solidarity amongst ourselves and being able to support one another should there be the need. I personally just think we need more unity within our community, within our homes, amongst ourselves, amongst our families, not just in a time of crisis, but in our everyday lives. So I don't know if I'm the only person that's out here that feels like this. I don't think that I am, based on what I see and the circle of influence that I involve myself. But the solidarity and reflection will support and build an inner peace. It will reinforce our ability to maintain our self-confidence and maintain our ability to interact without being immediately viewed as the villain amongst ourselves. And I'm choosing my words carefully because the media sometimes has a role to play in whether or not we have solidarity amongst ourselves and if that is actually a negative thing. And to me, I don't think it is a negative thing to know that I can go and talk to my brother or talk to someone that has had a similar experience as me and share information on how to interact or how to avoid escalating a situation. I'm pausing a little bit because I really want this to be a positive message, and no matter what, anybody can take things and turn them or spin them for their own intent or purpose. But to be real, you know, unity is something that I'm thinking about. Queen Latifah's song is something that we've been talking about for 30 years, if not more. And I think it'll happen one day. I'm just not sure when and where. And I know it's happening right now. It's just not amongst the masses. It doesn't mean that everybody thinks the same either. It doesn't mean that everybody does the same exact thing. But it does mean that we're all in support of a solution. It's one thing to not be aligned with a thought or an idea or a solution and be willing to try to work toward some type of common goal. And it's a completely different thing to not be aligned with that thought or idea and never have a solution. You know, complaining and never having a way to resolve things is not going to help the basis, the foundation of unity and solidarity sustain. So I'm speaking just generally, and if it resonates, please leave a comment or let me know if you have other thoughts on how solidarity and unity can be brought to life and lived on a daily basis. Last thing I want to mention and leave you with is one thing that we can do, one habit that we can introduce to at least be more aware and be more cognizant of how we're feeling, so that when it's time to show solidarity amongst one another, we know how we're feeling, and we know that another person's response or reaction to a solution or an idea that we bring to the table isn't a personal attack. So just because I don't agree, it doesn't mean that I'm personally attacking your idea. I just see that this is an area that we're either going to have to deal with every time this matter comes up, or we can find a solution that encompasses all those things so we don't have to keep hashing back over this. So one thing that we can do is just write in a journal. Of course, have a mental note of how you're feeling, so that if you think you don't need to go into work, or you shouldn't go into work because you're at your wit's end, at least be aware of that. Take a personal day, call in, whatever it is you can do to avoid crashing out. Having a journal, getting those things out, getting those emotions out. There was one time I had zero belief in writing things out, just none. And maybe over time and maturing, that changed, where I seen it played out, helped me understand how that process can be therapeutic and can help you avoid having an unnecessary argument. I had a supervisor who we would be on a group email, we would receive an email from a guy who never wanted to cooperate. He explained to me he would write a response in the email. He might not put that person's email address in there just in case if he accidentally hit send, it wouldn't get back to him. But it was almost as if getting it out, saying it, physically typing it out, got it out of his consciousness, and even though that message never got sent to the person, it was almost as if it did, and he didn't feel like he was holding it in. It was like, okay, I understand. Having a journal wherever you go, not taking it everywhere you go, but wherever you go, and then you come back to your journal and write about, this is my interaction, this is what happened. And it's also a written record of your life. If you journal weekly, daily, 10 years, you have a written record for your children, for your legacy, for your family members, or for people who are just a part of society to know what was going on directly from your experience, not from what you thought, but from what you experienced. So journaling, observing exactly what's going on, writing it down so that you have an idea of how you're feeling in that moment, going back to read those thoughts, reflecting, saying, hey, this is how I handled it, or this is what I could have done better a couple weeks, days, or months down the road, is an activity I think we all have the ability to take part in. Another simple call to action is reaching out to one another, calling to see how another man is doing. If you haven't heard from them, or if you know a scenario is taking place that could easily cause this person to become emotional, and for example, it's fall and holiday season is approaching, and a lot of people go through seasonal depression, given the fact that, especially if they lost someone during this period of time, during this time of the year at some period in time, or if they just miss the way that we used to celebrate together and miss the memories that we used to have, or the foods. It could be therapeutic and very much helpful to call that person or call someone that you may be thinking of. It just so happens that you thought of them. Send them a text message to make them aware that somebody is thinking about them, and maybe you don't have time to listen to everything that's going on, but you just want to make sure that they're aware that somebody has them on your mind. In short, I appreciate you all being here, being self-aware, knowing where we are mentally and physically before we go out into the world, and not just letting things happen, but taking a moment to pause before you respond and react rather than being baited into a scenario is one major healthy habit that can just help us be better stewards in life for ourselves. Forget about everybody else for a minute. And becoming the best you is the ultimate goal, the ultimate prize. Taking the time to have a journal, write down what you're thinking, what your thoughts are, is something that is not very expensive and could also help you become your better self as well. And appreciate your time. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you haven't already, please like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you haven't already, share it with somebody that you know. All right, until next time, peace.